So, my name is Daniel, Select Advice Finance, and I'm just on site here talking about first home buyers and how it's possible to get into the market where you might otherwise not have thought it was possible. I guess the key here is that as a first home buyer, you are able to get into the market as long as you conform to certain ideas and concepts that the bank puts forward. So things like, what you'll need to understand is things like LVR, loan to value ratio. The key components are your deposit, all right, what sort of deposit you have. And as well as that, you'll need to be able to service a debt, so your income. So they're the three key points that we need to impart as a broker to our new first home buyer clients in order to qualify them for a loan. So the first part of that is we'll talk about income and serviceability. Okay, so your income and serviceability is basically what you earn and how much of that can be put towards a loan or a purchase. And the bank has specific calculators, all the banks, and when I say banks it's a generic term, all the banks have generic calculators that we can use to determine your affordability. And as a general rule, and it's very general, you as a first home buyer, or anybody in fact, will generally be able to borrow around about 6 times your income. So if you're on $50,000, you'll be able to generally borrow around $300,000. Now, the second part to that is around deposit. And the deposit is a limiting factor. And the reason it's a limiting factor is because it determines what the purchase price is. So if you have, let's say for argument's sake, you're looking at buying this house over here, and this house is $600,000. But unfortunately, you only have $20,000 as a deposit. Then we need to readjust your expectations to be able to work with what deposit you've got. And in that case, you might only be able to borrow a property worth $400,000. So as a general rule, and this is where point number 3 comes in terms of LVR, loan to value ratio, you're only able to borrow, as a general rule, up to 95% of the value of a property, which in general terms is 5% deposit. Now, we also need to take into account things like stamp duty. So there are specific caps that the government has put in place, any governments, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, WA, around first home buyers and around the ability for them to offset the costs in terms of stamp duty. So if you go over that cap, it's graded stamp duty. If you stay under that cap, there is no stamp duty. That will absolutely increase the ability to borrow more, because we don't need to take that 5.5% of the value of the property into account. So if we're working on basic numbers, and let's take that $600,000 property again, 5% of that is $30,000. So in order to qualify for a loan, we need $30,000 in deposit. That gives us 95%. We then need to take into account any stamp duty. Again, if it's under the cap, there's no stamp duty. If it's over the cap, you'll need extra funds to be able to fund that particular property. There's also a factor of, sorry, just truck going past. There's also a factor of mortgage insurance. Now, with all lenders in Australia, they risk grade their loans. So anything over 80%, so that's 20% deposit, borrowing 80% of the value of the property, they outsource their risk to what's called a lender's mortgage insurance. And the lender's mortgage insurance is a cost to the consumer to protect the bank to offset their risk. So we need to take into account the fee for the lender's mortgage insurance to be added onto the loan. Okay, so all of these are limiting factors. Now, having said all that, as a first home buyer, you are able to buy a property, but we need to take those 3 things into account, not separately, but together. So your income, what can it afford? Your deposit, what can it afford? And the LVR, which lenders would then be able to lend to you based on that information. So I hope that this kind of helps to understand that as a first home buyer, yes, you can get into a property, but we need to adjust expectations to take into account those three very important pieces of information to then determine what you can borrow based on those three bits of information. I hope that this helps you to understand a little bit more about how we can help as a first home buyer. My name is Danny Steen. My phone number is 0408 311 408. For Select Advice Finance, my web address www.selectadvicefinance.com. I'm really looking forward to you giving me a call so we can discuss your personal circumstances and to confirm how we qualify you, not if, but how we qualify you into a first home buyer and into your brand new home. Thanks for listening.